Welcome back to the show. Today, our guest is Mr. Yusuf Saber, who is one of the leading minds within data science in the region. He's one of the most interesting people that I've ever spoken to, and every time I talk to him, I walk away thinking in new ways that I've never thought of before. So it's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the kind words.
You're most welcome. Now, let's rewind a little bit to your time at ETH in Zurich, where you spent researching on machine learning. My first question would be, what first drew you into that?
So I was originally in electrical engineering, and we had this one course where we learned about neural networks. And at the time, neural networks were fairly, I'd say, kind of in its dormant time. So there were a few years where it wasn't very exciting, but I found it extremely exciting. And I started looking, okay, how do I learn more about where this came from? And I learned that this bigger field is machine learning. So I started looking, okay, where do people do like the best machine learning work? So there were a few places in the US, like MIT, Carnegie Mellon, but I wanted to stay closer to the region. So Europe, the place where some of the most cutting edge research was at the ETH in Zurich. So I was fortunate enough to get accepted and spent a few years doing machine learning there.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
And then what was your research mostly focused on?
So where I was, it was, there were two groups working very closely together. So one group was the neuroscientists who were spending a lot of time trying to understand how our brains work. And the other group was trying to take some of those learnings and look for computational applications of them. And surprisingly, initially I thought that kind of the inspiration goes one way, so from neuroscience to computation, but I was surprised to see it actually goes both ways. So there were lots of ideas that people first thought of as algorithms, but then realized that they're analogs to those in how the brains work. And it was fascinating to be on the interface between the two. So like maybe a little under half of my work was with the neuroscience group, and a little bit more than half was with the machine learning group. And the area where we spent the most time was audio. So how does our mind process audio? How do we, like you could hear just a friend say, and you'd know who they are. They even speak, but you would recognize that that's the person from a very tiny amount of audio signal. And we wanted to understand how do we do this, and can we build algorithms that can recognize speakers from very tiny audio samples. And that's where I spent a bit of time doing research.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's crazy to think how we're now at a stage where we're replicating what's going on in the human brain and trying to put that into computers, and how far we've come with AI now as well, and neural networks, because at the time there, as you said, it was the dormant stage, and now the stage that we're in, it's mind-blowing.
It is.
Yeah. So how did your academic experience and your research there either prepare you or challenge you when you entered the startup world?
So maybe a transition. So when I first started out, neural networks were, just if we zoom out, so neural networks were maybe one of the very first machine learning algorithms that people kind of thought of. So you see the beginnings were in the 50s, where the earliest neural networks, came to be. And then they had, maybe a decade or a little more of excitement. And then there was a period where there was not much happening. And then around the 80s, there were some significant breakthroughs with, backpropagation and how people are able to train them to do useful things. And then there was quite an extended period where, again, there wasn't a lot that was happening. And then until the late 90s, when there was again some excitement with some of the recognition of letters and numbers, and started to have some real applications. But then there was again quite some time with not much going on. And people, and this is where I entered the field. So in the around 2008, 2009. And at this time, there was a lot more excitement around other algorithms in machine learning. It's only around 2012 that people started getting really, really excited with, you probably heard about AlexNet and the people who were behind AlexNet, were some of them were people behind OpenAI. And that was the real starting point where the field kind of took off. So that was the moment where I was very much into machine learning research. So got to witness that kind of resurgence and kind of rise of neural networks. And the thing that I kind of took away most from the time that you had a lot of curious people. So at the time, like we got it was proven, it was shown that these networks can do useful work. So if we give them enough compute, if we give them enough data, and if we have the patience and the perseverance to iterate, we can really get so much value out of them. And suddenly there was this explosion of a lot of smart people in a lot of places trying to take that same recipe and applying it to many other problems. And that's actually where I kind of transitioned out to apply that to the problem of recommendations to very, very large catalogs of products or news or fashion, where there isn't enough data to build depth around any one item, but you still want to be able to say which item is suitable for which person with that very sparse amount of information. So the idea of working with sparse data was what I mentioned earlier, with recognizing speakers from very sparse data. I wanted to take that same idea and the same kind of network architectures and apply it to retail with massive data sets. And that's how I transitioned from academia to retail or to startups.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And to me, it's mind-blowing to think, because I use Careem and Talabat very frequently, and to think that I know one of the people that was a part to build there is just insane. And it's accurate, because the product recommendations and that I get are typically things that I end up needing within the moment. And yeah, it's just mind-blowing, because we all see the user interface, but I don't think a lot of people recognize the work and the genius behind everything on the back end and how it operates. So this leads me to my next question. What was the most complex data problem that you solved at Careem or Talabat?
I think let's spend a little bit of time at Careem.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to join Careem fairly early. So the data team, I think at the time we were maybe just 2 people when I first started. And over the next 3 years, the team grew to a much larger team. And the structure that we had there, so there were the team that focused on data infrastructure and engineering. So, and these were absolutely critical. I think Careem was fortunate in a way that we started doing things right very, very early. Like a lot of companies would realize once they become fairly large that, hey, we haven't really thought much about our data and how the data should be structured so that we can actually get value out of it. And then it becomes a very painful exercise to then catch up on years of debt on their data front. I think with Careem we started fairly early, and it kind of was built right from the beginning, and that allowed us to kind of work on very interesting problems very early on. So there were two large groups. So the first one was focused on, call it marketplace, and like when you're booking, there is a lot of work that goes to determine which rider goes to which customer. And it's not just the nearest driver. There are lots of things that are taken into account to determine how to do this matching. And then there are also things like dynamic pricing. So if at certain points in time there is too much demand and not much supply, so Careem has to incentivize more drivers to become available, and to do that the price goes up so that they have a larger incentive to be there. But if we take it up too much, then we can hurt demand by a lot, and we get a lot of drivers, and then suddenly there's no one who's willing to pay that high price. So it was a very sensitive optimization problem, and one that had to happen in real time and really quickly, and the stakes were pretty high. So that was one team, the marketplace team. I think here some of the most interesting work was done. And then there was another team that was sitting in the same place, but working on a very different problem, which we call it platform integrity, which focused a lot on the abuse that we were seeing in some of our locations. And if you imagine a company that's trying to grow, usually there is a lot of incentives that are being given, and on both sides. So imagine a marketplace, and you have to incentivize customers to use the application, especially when you're starting in a new market. and also incentivize drivers to be available. And this creates a lot of opportunities for players who want to kind of abuse the system to make some financial gain out of it. And we had to kind of be one step ahead, so we had to understand how these things were happening, and we could only see their kind of traces or footprints in the data. So kind of like a detective game where the clues you have are the signals you have in the data. So how, when they open the app, when they navigate, the nature of the phones that they're using, the patterns of how they click different things. They're actually very different from a genuine user. So they first, see where they want to go. They look, how much time it takes, versus someone who's, perpetrating fraud. They use the app very differently. And that tap stream, as we used to call it, tells us an interesting story. And we had to build algorithms to kind of, based on that, determine if the person on the other side is a genuine customer or genuine driver, or someone who is trying to abuse the system. I think that was probably one of the most interesting problems we worked on, and probably because it was there was a constant escalation. So once we figured out, okay, now we have algorithms that are very good at capturing this particular way of abusing the system, you'd have new ways that would come up, and then we'd have to figure out ways to be there. And I think the team did a really good job staying ahead.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating, because to think that you're able to identify who's a genuine user versus who's trying to abuse the platform through something as simple as just the clicks on what they're trying to do, so you can prevent them from doing it before they actually get to the abuse stage of the application. I think that's absolutely amazing. And that also brings me to another question of, are you using some of those principles now on your platform of Optima? Or what's the translation of what you've learned at Careem and Talabat over to Optima now?
So I think it comes in lots of ways. So if I was to think about it, I think I put in 3 categories. So the first one is working at these environments, just being there. You learn so much by being around very capable people who bring their own experience. You see how they tackle problems, things from how do I build a team? How do I build a culture that keeps the best people engaged and doing their best work? So there's so much that you learn just by seeing what good looks like at some of these organizations that you just can't help but take with you to whatever you're going to do next. I think there's a reason why you see a lot of very interesting and successful organizations were built by people who came from Careem. And it's not just Careem, you'd see a lot of examples, like the original PayPal example, where you had all of these PayPal in early team members who went on to build things like Tesla and YouTube and Yelp and so on. I think that's one thing, what you learn just seeing how a great company is built and run. And then the second is the technical knowledge, which is a lot of lessons, building, solving problems and so on, which you take with you. And I think at Careem, a lot of what we did, we're doing for the first time. So we're doing a lot of trial and error. When I was in Talabat, I had that benefit of having done it before, so we could move significantly faster than how we were at Careem. And then with Optima, a lot of these problems are essentially the same, but packaged a little differently. So we have that, fortunate enough that we've done this before, so we don't have to spend a lot of time. Of course, there is a difference. The context is different, so some things might not translate as well, but many solutions do. And the final thing is the problem itself. If I hadn't spent that time with these organizations, I think I wouldn't have had that level of clarity on the problem that we're solving. So the problem we're solving really is continuous education for professionals. And you'd see professionals that their time is very tight. They're under a lot of pressure to learn and grow, to continue to move forward in their career. And the nature of the content that's available out there, I think a lot of the content is built for kind of earlier education, like school, and that's very, very different from the nature of education for professionals. A lot of the time, professionals are not learning because they have to get a degree. they're learning because they need to solve a problem. So they need whatever they're learning to be directly relevant to the problems that they have. Otherwise, it's not interesting. And if you don't have an exam or don't have a degree to get, then what's the motivation? So the motivation, I care because I see how this technique or this concept is going to help me be more successful at the problems I solve on a day-to-day. So that was a big realization that we had starting Optima. And the other one was that with professional learning, people have very different backgrounds. So if in school, everyone in grade 6, you can have like a fairly reliable assumptions on what they know and what they don't. But when you're doing professional learning, it's much, much harder to have those assumptions about what people come in knowing and not knowing. So you need to kind of solve around that as well. And you need the variability is very high. So any successful platform for continuous professional learning needs to be able to adapt to that massive variability. So that's on the experience side. And then on the content side, maybe because the area I worked in was usually data, and build that conviction that data is not just for data practitioners. Like, you have that small group of people in any organization who are, have a title like data engineer or data scientist or machine learning engineer. And they need to, obviously be good at the skills of working with data. But I think if a company looks at, data skill sets as just limited to those groups, I think they're leaving like so much value on the table. I think the true value of those skills is when they are applied by essentially everyone at the company. So everyone needs to ask questions to help them, make decisions or solve problems. And a lot of the time, these questions are answered with data. So I have to learn how to ask a good data question that actually gets me valuable insight into my problem. And then all of the time, people see, dashboards, and they get presented with reports, and they need to look at those numbers and kind of interpret what they're trying to say, and then take something out of them that helps with what they're trying to do. And this process sounds easy, but it is exceptionally difficult. And there's like almost an infinite number of potential pitfalls, from our own cognitive biases to kind of basics around like statistical significance or understanding confounding, and how many relationships that look really compelling are actually not real. They're not causal. There is no action that we can take based on that relationship. And unless someone takes the time to, invest in themselves and learn this stuff, they can easily, be misled in thinking, I am data driven, I'm looking at reports and making decisions, but I'm actually being misled by data and making decisions that are probably not as good as I think they are. So I think being in those organizations, I had a very visceral sense of what the problem is, and kind of took that into building Optima.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also I want to pick up on what you said, being misled by data, because I think a lot of the time people end up confusing correlation and causation. Yeah. And that's something I did myself as well when I was looking at data, because I started off in personal training, where I love to read a bunch of studies on what's the best thing to do in order to achieve something. And I would confuse the correlation and the causation. So having that understanding of data and how, first of all, what's going on in the background and how the numbers are calculated, and then being able to extract what you're doing is super important. And I definitely agree with you. Everyone should be doing it. It shouldn't just be for a data engineer. All of your decisions should be backed by some sort of data that you have collected.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Now I want to transition into Optima. What made you decide to go from the data at Careem and Talabat into entering the education space?
So I think from very, very early, I kind of was always excited about explaining things to people who really cared about understanding them. And I think even from school days, some of the most fun times I had was when I'd stay back with some friends and kind of help explain something to them. And then going into every organization I've been at, I think I was fortunate enough to have the support and the teams to start a learning initiative. So at Careem, we started the Careem Data Science Academy, which the leaders who came after at Careem, I'm grateful to them for keeping it alive and making it even better. Until today, it's still running, and I think better than it ever was. And through those initiatives, I found a lot of fulfillment, like seeing people who were, at Careem, it's a very large organization. We had, hundreds of people in roles like, customer care, close to 1,000 people at some points, people who manage, do operational roles around like managing the supply, helping with, marketing campaigns. And a lot of the time, in those roles, you don't find that deep level of fulfillment. They tend to be fairly repetitive. You're not, mentally challenged as much. And a lot of people doing those things were really, really smart people, and they just needed a break. They need someone to like help them get into something that's more a fit to what they're mentally prepared to do, and to like help them make the move. And we needed at Careem and in many other organizations good data analysts, good data engineers. Like if you look at how long it takes to fill a data role, it's like insane. Like you can spend 6 months and not manage to fill a data role, even with serious headhunters and recruiters working on it.
That's insane.
It is. And so we thought like, let's start this. And given that it's very demanding in terms of time, we developed a simple formula where we had more than 50 people on the data team side. So we said each person on the data team, it's completely voluntary. They can choose to do it or not do it. We'll essentially adopt one person who wants to get into data from anywhere in the company, provided that person does this series of 3 courses just to show commitment. And then once they did that initial set of courses, they'd have that data mentor who would meet them once a week. And then we had a curriculum for each one depending on the particular aspects of data they needed to learn. It was like within data, you have at least like 6 different roles. So where were we helping them get? And they had the guidance on what to learn. Anything that was like a paid content or paid courses, Careem covered that cost. And we had that mentor who was there. So someone who, when you're trying to get into a field like data, a big challenge is, okay, what should I learn out of these hundreds of courses? So we tried to reduce that to a very clear kind of learning path that you need to take. And then as you go, you have questions, you want to someone to kind of talk to help you think, okay, what's the practical relevance of this thing that I'm looking at? So having access to like a practicing data scientist or engineer helped there. And of course, cost for some of those. We worked with their managers so that they had enough time every week to actually make progress on the learning. And then some of the happiest moments were when we saw some of these people kind of go through this and then get a role in data, whether at Careem or at a different organization. And I felt like I just want to do a lot more of this. So that's where I felt like this has to happen. After Careem, there was the Talabat journey. And I had to feel, okay, now is the time. And then a year would go by, and then I wasn't getting any younger. So at some point I said, like, it has to happen now. So yeah, decided to go all in.
Yeah, it's honestly amazing to hear. And I think there should be more people like you who truly have that passion for explaining things and are helping to see other people grow. And I think that's brilliant. And that culture at Careem sounds absolutely amazing, where you're helping the employees within the organization grow instead of extracting the talent from elsewhere, because then that's what ultimately they understand the company already the best. They're just missing the necessary tools that they need to excel even further. Yeah. So I think that's absolutely amazing. And then now with Optima, what's the specific problem that you're solving? I know you touched upon it earlier, but I want to dive a bit deeper.
Yeah, so I think it is this professional, continuous learning for professionals. And with our current focus is data and AI. So I think data has always been an area where a professional could just significantly multiply their impact if they had those data skills. So both, technical skills were always a plus, but really what we discussed earlier about the ability to ask the right questions and interpret the data accurately and use it in the right way in their decision making. So that was one side, so data skills for professionals. And the other side now with the advent of AI and how it's proven to be an even bigger multiplier of someone's impact and productivity. So that became kind of the second aspect of what we're focused on. So at the moment we are working on 4 areas. So within data we have 2 areas. One is more technical, so for people who want to start a career in data, or people who are professionals, like someone in product or in marketing, but they want to be fairly self-sufficient when it comes to answering their questions with data. So I don't want to stand in line waiting for an analyst to pull the numbers and give me an answer. And we believe that there is no better time to build that skill than now, because just by learning the essentials, I can use some of these models to do most of the work for me. Like, you'd see something that is really fascinating. You'd see people who don't know how to code. They rarely use tools like ChatGPT to solve problems that involve coding. There's just that barrier. Even with all of the hype around vibe coding and whatnot, still the majority of people would not use it in a professional way to do things. But I just need to break that barrier between myself and colleagues. Learn the basics of Python for data analysis, and that could be like a 2 to 3 month journey. And with just that essential understanding, I can use AI to do a lot of work. Like, I tell people, before you needed like 3 years of depth and experience to be able to do things. Now, 3 months plus AI, you get the same value. But if you don't invest those 3 months in yourself, you can't really validate what the AI is doing. You can't give it the right feedback. You don't even know what to ask it to do, because I don't know what is possible. So that's like the first area. So that essential knowledge I need to have, so I can answer my questions with data, especially leveraging AI to do it in a meaningful way. And then the second area within data is again that around making, we call it decision intelligence, and it's everything that goes into improving the quality of my decisions with data. Now, on the other side, the AI side, we have the first area, we call it GenAI professional productivity. And it's focused around how do I communicate better using AI? How can I run more effective meetings using AI? How can I improve how I consume information using AI? So research is another area of focus. There are about 10 areas that are primary activities that any professional spends a lot of time doing. And each of them can be significantly amplified in terms of quality of result, but also efficiency, if the person has like the right mindset on how does AI fit in, how can I make the most out of it. And of course, the basics of tools change all the time, so that's secondary. We focus a lot more on like the mindset, that collaboration, co-creation mindset. What do I bring to the table versus what does my AI bring to the table, and how do we work together to achieve those results. And the last area that we focus on is GenAI product development. And this is for engineers and people in data who want to become AI engineers. So you see now there are a lot of people who have amazing ideas on how they can solve problems that either were impossible to solve or very hard or very expensive to solve in the past using generative AI today. And you'd find that within organizations, so lots of ideas on how they can leverage AI in different ways, but also entrepreneurs and people who are thinking around that. The question is, how do I prototype this? How do I take that idea and realize it into something reliable that I can actually put out there? So that's what we cover here. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I love the fact that you focus on the fundamentals, because I also 100% agree. And from my own experience, I've realized now, just through learning the fundamentals of something and then co-creating with AI, I'm able to do so much more and be so much more productive, especially within coding.
Exactly.
Where I've got a fundamental knowledge of code. However, now with ChatGPT, I'm able to build things and explore different models and things that I would you'd require years of experience to do. But now with using ChatGPT, other tools where I can then apply my fundamental knowledge into the theory of the other things, then I'm able to do so much more.
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely brilliant, and more people should start to do that. even if you don't know how to code or you don't have a skill, just to have a conversation with AI and be just to ask, what are the fundamentals first that I should learn? What's step by step? Because I feel like it can be very good at guiding you and giving you that sense of direction to identify the gaps in your knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one thing we keep coming back to is that there are these timeless principles almost of doing things, like timeless principles of effective communication. Like first, like know your audience, have a lot of clarity on the message that you have, and have clarity on the outcome. What do you want to achieve out of that message? Do you want people to be inspired? Do you want them to be to take a particular action? And those principles have essentially stayed the same. And if I have no awareness of what those are, then that's a handicap in how much value I can get out of AI. People who have that understanding of like what is effective communication and how it's done, they can get so much more value of AI. And that applies to, you know, things that we all do, like communication, and also technical areas, like what questions do I ask when I see this kind of data visualization? That is not changed. And AI will, you know, generate the visualization for me, but it might not, you know, answer the question that I should have asked on its own. Still that's on me to ask the question. Of course, I can go down the rabbit hole, like what question should I be asking, but I have no guarantee that it will give me the right ones every time. So there's still some, I think for a very long time, we still need to keep, you know, a bit of that agency, a bit of that depth. First, I think we're giving up, and I think for very good reason, some of the execution of tasks, but we should absolutely retain those fundamental timeless principles and be a lot more aware and versed in them, so that we can realize that large multiplier value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And yeah, so I want to talk a bit about the personalization on Optima, because I've seen the platform and it's absolutely fantastic for learning. How do you personalize the learning journey at scale? Because I feel like that's always tricky to balance.
Yeah. So I think when we started thinking about this, we kept iterating. Like we had 3 versions of Optima at the beginning, and we felt like we still didn't get this part right. So what we're trying to do is we briefly discussed earlier. So first is we want everything that a person is learning to be directly connected to what they care about, to what they are trying to do. And second, we want the pace to change to cover that large variability between us. It would slow down for someone who needs support, and it would, you know, significantly speed up for someone who maybe has some awareness, is, you know, particularly sharp today, and they can move a lot faster. But we realized some months ago that there's no way to do this like meaningfully so long as we hold on to static content. So, you know, all of learning is built around static content, like the teacher writes the content or the, you know, company produces the course videos. So at the end of the day, there is static content, whether it's a video or an article that we read or certain exercises that we do. And so long as we have static content in the equation, it doesn't leave space to solve for these things we just mentioned. So they're like, if we can do this, then we have to lose static content. And that was like a very hard realization, because we've been working for like, you know, 9 months at that point, creating our own static content. And we put like so much effort into it, and we felt, okay, to move forward, we have to leave this behind. And the core idea was that we provide the system with the learning objectives for this particular lesson, and we give it a set of tools. So depending on what we're learning, so you see if we're learning, you know, data manipulation, or we are learning how to build GenAI products, then it has a complete coding environment that it can use. It has, you know, what we call AI slides. So slides, like we control slides to move, you know, animations and see the next progression. Equivalent version that the AI can control and move forward and backward to support its explanation. Like tables where it can highlight certain rows or columns and show things. Interactive figures where it can zoom in on things and help me see them. So we built this, you know, set of tools and provided that setup where the AI gets the learning objectives, gets these tools, and gets a detailed profile for each learner. So when the learner starts on the platform, the first 10 minutes, they have a conversation with the AI tutor where It gets to ask them about their goals, about their background, what they do on a day-to-day, kind of problems that they are engaged in solving now, what they like to do for fun. And then out of this conversation, we get this very rich and valuable profile that makes it possible to adapt things to them. And now in real time, imagine that this is going on. It looks at the conversation so far, the profile of the learner, and it's constantly assessing their competence with the material. So before explaining any new idea, it will check what comes to mind when you hear, neural networks. And then only based on that will it adapt the explanation. So someone who has never heard of them, they'd get like maybe 3-minute explanation. Someone who gave an answer that shows that they have a deep understanding of them would maybe get a 20-second summary. And it would proceed this way until the lesson is covered. There were lots of challenges to make this work, but I think it was fascinating to see it come together.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And that's what I think makes your platform so great, is the fact that no two people are going to learn in the same way. And I think that's been a big problem within education, whether it's for professional development or in the K-12 within schools. So what you're doing is fantastic. And I would love to go more into this, but unfortunately we're running a bit short on time. So I just want to ask you a few rapid fire questions, and I just want you to answer with the first thing that comes to your mind.
Let's do it.
What's one tech trend that you're excited about?
Tech trend. I think thinking models and inference time compute. I think there are problems that can now be approached once you have this, and also that you control how much thinking to invest, I think is really, really empowering, because you essentially control how much intelligence you want to dedicate to a problem, given how much its economic value is. So it's almost like you now have this knob to say, I want to throw more intelligence at this problem or less. And that knob is two things. It's how much time, so how much latency you can have in your system, but also how much I am willing to pay for that thinking. I think it's fascinating. It's like unprecedented that you can dial up and down the amount of intelligence targeted at a problem.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
And then what's one mistake that's taught you the most?
I think it's knowing something, especially when it comes to people, but taking too long to act on it. I hear this advice a lot, like great leaders take a while to hire, but they fire quickly, and I always found this really, really hard. And some of I think the hardest or the costliest mistakes were from this, like just that wishful thinking that things will turn out great, even after like there's been ample evidence of the contrary.
Yeah. And then lastly, what's one book or podcast that you would recommend to people to read or listen?
I think it's a bit controversial, but I think the book Life 3.0 is really valuable. I think it acts as a counterbalance to kind of the excitement that we have now around AI. And like I wouldn't take everything there like absolutely literally, but I think the points are very compelling. The reasoning is very solid. And I think it's just reading it, we get like a more mature perspective on like AI and what it could look like in years from now. And I think by being mindful of kind of the positive and negative potential scenarios, we can make like better decisions today. So definitely Life 3.0.
I'll definitely read that. It sounds absolutely fascinating. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute honor to have you here, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, lastly, to anyone watching, if you want to advance your professional career, I definitely recommend checking out Optima.io. We'll put the information in the description box down below, and thank you so much for watching.